Hello students. This video is being recorded to discuss or to have a recap on the things we had discussed in the previous online class. So in the previous online class, we discussed about the basic business model, okay, where I showed you the different types of transactions that are involved in any kind of business. So the transactions were like, for any business to begin its operations, it requires capital. So it collects capital from the potential investors, right? And it uses that capital to perform various economic activities. And it eventually ends up manufacturing a product, or it provides a service to the end consumers. Okay, so these are the different kinds of transactions basically performed by any kind of business. So now, when we are talking about corporate accounting, we are basically talking about the transactions that are made by a company. Okay, so the company, when it performs the various activities within a financial year, all of those transactions are to be recorded so that we can prepare the annual report, which includes the financial statements. Okay, so whatever we will be learning in this corporate accounting is basically a part of the financial statement. So the financial statement includes of the profit and loss statement, balance sheet, and the different things that we had discussed in the previous class. So this financial statement has a huge importance in terms of any kind of company. So it is important for the company, for the people within the company, that is the managers, right? I told you how the managers can look at the financial statements and know about the performance of the company. Similarly, it is also important for the external people, the people outside the company, like the investors, right, who are willing to invest. So for them also it is of great importance, right? So these are the reasons why we are to make this record of transactions that are taking place within a company. So the first unit that we were starting with was the issue of shares. So issue of shares is basically the part where the company is collecting its capital, right? The first transactions that take place in any kind of company. So issuing of shares basically means that the company is selling its ownership to people who are interested in buying the ownership of the company. So when issue of shares are taking place, okay, the company basically can issue two types of shares. Firstly is the equity shares, and secondly the preference shares. So the differences amongst these two types of shares that are there is quite simple. In equity shares, there is risk involved, meaning that for equity shareholders, what they receive in return is the dividend, that is a share of the profit of the company. And whereas the preference shareholders basically receive an interest. Okay, interest is something that you receive on a fixed rate. Okay, so like let's say if the interest rate is 10%, okay, so you will be receiving 10% of interest of the investments that you have made, regardless of the profits or the losses that the company has made. But in the case of equity shareholders, what happens is you will be receiving dividend only if the company has made certain profits. And even what happens is, out of that profit, the profit is first used to pay off the interest of the preference shareholders, and only whatever is remaining out of that profit, that will be divided amongst the different shareholders as dividend. Okay, there are many more differences amongst these two types of shares, which I will be forwarding to you all later on, a small note on equity shares and preference shares. After that, we basically discussed the subdivisions of the share capital. So now normally what happens is, when you look at the balance sheet of any company, out here I have just uh, taken a picture of a company's balance sheet. On the liability sides, if you see, okay, in the liability side, when you see, basically what you see out here is the first entry that is there is about the shareholders fund, and under the head of shareholders fund we have share capital. So out here what is stated is the share capital of the company is about 22 lakhs. But this 22 lakhs, it what is inside this 22 lakhs that we still do not know, isn't it? Like how many equity shares are there, how many preference shares are there, how many shares has actually been issued by the company, how many shares, equity shares or preference shares can the company actually issue, okay, how much, what is their authorized capital, all these things we do not no, right? So if we actually, what happens is if we are to put everything in the balance sheet, what happens is the balance sheet becomes very huge, and in the sense it becomes difficult for the readers to understand, the people who are using these data. For them what happens is there becomes a case where it might get confusing to the managers and to the investors. For that purpose, the details about the share capital is supposed to be attached as a note. Like yahanira ke cha bhandakeri, if you see, the note number is given and note number 1 is given as the reference. So note number 1, it would basically contain all the details about the uh, share capital. Okay, so now let's see how it is supposed to be done. Like we've already discussed this, right, in the previous class. So the details of the share capital in the notes to accounts is supposed to be provided in this manner. Okay, this is actually a pro forma of how the details about the share capital is disclosed. So now first, if you see out here, we have authorized capital. So authorized capital basically means the total number of equity shares and preference shares that the company can actually issue. There is a limit, okay? एउटा कुनै पनि एउटा कम्पनीको के हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि कतिवटा सेयर्स उनीहरूले कलेक्ट गर्न सक्ने, ओके, कतिवटा प्रेफरेन्स सेयर्स उनीहरूले कलेक्ट गर्न सक्ने, देयर इज अ लिमिट टु द्याट, ओके, विच इज बेसिकली मेन्सन्ड इन देयर मेमोरेन्डम अफ articles. Okay, so basically authorized capital ma ke huncha bhandakeri it is the number of shares that the company can actually issue. And then the next subdivision is issued capital. Like I already told you yesterday, issued capital bhaneko, like let's say for instance in the authorized capital yesterday also we've discussed, if supposing the company can authorize or collect 100 shares. So now the current requirement of the company may not be of the full 100 shares. So it may only want to issue, let's say, 80 shares, right? So that is the issued capital. Out of the 100 which they can actually sell, they are only selling 80 as of now, because that is the requirement of their capital as of now. Okay, so that issued capital means out of the authorized capital, how much or how many shares have actually been offered for sale to the investors. Okay, then subscribe capital basically means out of the 80, yeah, just say example I've told you the company has issued 80 shares. Out of that 80 shares, what can happen is all 80 might not be bought by the investors. Investors, they all might not consider this company worth investing. So what might happen is out of that only, let's say 50 order shares might only have been purchased by the investors. Okay, such a situation can happen, right? So that out of the issued capital, okay, the number of shares that has actually been purchased or taken up by the investors is known as the subscribed capital. Okay, so now under subscribed capital also we have two categories, that is subscribed and fully paid, and we have another category that is subscribed but not fully paid. So subscribed and fully paid basically means you all must be knowing that each share has a value. Okay, it could be 10 rupees, 20 rupees. So yanira ke cha bhane, yanira example, okay, for example, let's say there is this company is supposing X Limited, and its value of each share is 10 rupees. Okay, now what might happen is this 10 rupees, when the people normally when the company they issue shares, they do not collect 10 rupees directly. Okay, they collect it in form of installments. Okay, first maybe 2 rupees collect garcha, त्यहाँदेखि later on 4 rupees, and eventually last 6 rupees. In that way normally the company collects the capital. So subscribed and fully paid basically means, okay, the number of shares that have been bought by the investors, and जुन चाहिँमा चाहिँ अब जस्तो यहाँ 10 rupees को shares छ, the entire 10 rupees has been paid up by the investor. Okay, so 10 rupees मा 10 rupees collect छ भने it will be known as subscribed and fully paid. But if suppose, okay, suppose if you see out here, there is this company is supposing X Limited, and its value of each share is 10 rupees. Okay, the value of each share is 10 rupees. So 10 rupees मा 10 rupees collect छ भने it will be known as subscribed and fully paid. On the other hand, subscribed but not fully paid basically means those shares which have been subscribed, people have said I will purchase it, तर त्यसको के भएको छ भने पेमेन्ट जुन चाहिँ 10 रुपिस को भ्याल्यु छ, the full of that has not been paid. अब जस्तो I told you it is collected in installments. Okay, so that first installment, second installment might त्यो मात्रै तिरेको छ अनि the final third installment is yet to be received by the company, then it will come under the category of subscribed but not fully paid. Okay, and then calls in arrears are also there, okay, which we will have to deduct, and forfeited shares are also there. And जुन चाहिँ यहाँनिर final value, the total value that comes, that is basically what is reflected in the balance sheet. Okay, so we will discuss this in the next class with an example where you will have a better understanding about all this in a better way. Once we do a particular practical example, then you will understand it even more clearly.